Don't you dare embarrass me, my sister, Chanel hissed through her teeth. Her manicured nails dug into my arm as we stood in the glittering lobby of the Ritz-Carlton. Mark's father is the hospital director. I said nothing. I simply adjusted the collar of my discount blouse with the same precision I used to clamp arteries. At dinner, she introduced me as the family disappointment. Then, Dr. Otis Sterling walked up. He looked right past Chanel's eager smile. He stopped directly in front of me and extended his hand. "Professor Vance," he said, his voice full of respect. "It is an honor to see you again." Chanel's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. "Please leave a comment letting me know which city you're following from. I really want to know who's listening to this story." To understand why the look on Chanel's face was worth more to me than my entire investment portfolio, you have to understand the architecture of our relationship. I am 32 years old. Chanel is 35. Growing up, she was the star. The loud one. The one who demanded the spotlight at every family gathering. I was the shadow. The quiet one who spent more time with books than with people. Chanel is a pharmaceutical sales representative. If you check her Instagram, she is the top performer in her region, draped in Gucci and driving a brand new BMW. If you check her bank account, which I have had to do multiple times to bail her out, she is drowning in credit card debt and barely making minimum payments. I, on the other hand, am a ghost. My family believes I work as a medical transcriber or a low-level administrative assistant. They think I live in a cramped apartment because I cannot afford better. They think I drive a 10-year-old sedan because I am a failure. They do not know that I am the youngest attending neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins. They do not know that my cramped apartment is actually a temporary stay, while my penthouse in the city is being renovated. They do not know that I drive a sedan because I prefer not to attract attention, while my vintage Porsche sits in a climate-controlled garage. I pay my parents' mortgage. I paid for Chanel's last 2 business trips, which were actually vacations to Cabo. But here is the twist. Chanel does not tell the family I pay for these things. She tells them she is helping me. Last Christmas, she handed me an envelope with $500 in front of everyone. "Here, Zyla," she said, her voice dripping with fake pity. "I know things are tight for you. Buy yourself something nice. Maybe a new dress, so you don't look so gray." My mother teared up. "Chanel, you are such a good sister, always looking out for Zyla." I took the envelope. I did not mention that the $500 was actually change from the $5,000 I had wired Chanel the day before to stop her car from being repossessed. I just said thank you. Outsiders looking in would call me pathetic. They would ask why a woman who holds human lives in her hands every day would let her mediocre sister treat her like a servant. But they do not understand the survivor's invisible chain. When you grow up in a cage with a tiger, you do not roar back. You learn that breathing too loud is an act of aggression. You learn to shrink. You learn to make yourself small, so the predator does not see you as a threat. My silence was not weakness. It was a calculated survival mechanism. I let Chanel believe she was the queen, because as long as she felt superior, she left me alone to build my empire in the dark. I was playing the long game. I just did not know the final round was about to begin. The summons came 3 weeks ago. Chanel barged into my apartment without knocking, waving a ring that cost more than the average American makes in a year. "I am getting married," she announced, flashing the diamond under my nose. "And you will never guess who it is." I didn't have to guess. She told me before I could even blink. Dr. Marcellus Sterling. I felt the air leave the room. I knew the name. Everyone in the medical world knew the name. The Sterlings were royalty in this city. Dr. Otis Sterling, the patriarch, was the chief of surgery and the director of the hospital where I had just been appointed as the head of neurosurgery. And Marcellus? I knew him too. He was a plastic surgeon who cared more about his Instagram following than his patients. He was also currently applying for a prestigious fellowship program, a program that I was in charge of overseeing. That is impressive, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Impressive? It is a miracle for this family, Chanel corrected, flopping onto my sofa. We are having an engagement dinner next Friday. At the Ritz-Carlton. His entire family will be there. His father, Dr. Otis Sterling, is coming. She paused, her eyes narrowing as she looked at me. Here it came. Okay, I said. I will come. But there are rules, Chanel said, holding up a finger. First, wear something plain. Do not try to look like you are competing with me. Second, and this is important, if anyone asks what you do, you tell them you are an unemployed administrative assistant looking for work. I stared at her. Excuse me? You heard me, she snapped. I already told Marcellus that my sister is a bit slow, that you have struggled to hold down a job. I told them you are a disappointment, Zyla. I had to. I could not have them thinking you were actually successful. It would confuse them. The Sterlings are high class. They understand hierarchy. I am the successful one. You are the charity case. It makes me look better, more benevolent, for taking care of you. The audacity was breathtaking. She wanted me to lie to the very people who signed my paychecks. She wanted me to play dumb in front of the man who called me a genius in the operating room just last week. And if I refuse? I asked calmly. Chanel stood up, smoothing her dress. Then I will tell Mom that you are jealous, that you are trying to sabotage my happiness. You know her heart is weak. You know she cannot handle stress. Do you want to be the reason she ends up in the hospital again? She knew exactly where to twist the knife. My mother was my only weakness. I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. She was terrified. She was so insecure, so desperate to be the main character, that she had to rewrite reality to keep her crown. Fine, I said. My voice was cold, flat. You want me to be a shadow? I will be a shadow. Good, she smiled, completely missing the dangerous look in my eyes. Just don't embarrass me. I almost laughed. She had no idea that she had just invited the executioner to her own wedding feast. I arrived at the Ritz-Carlton in my 10-year-old Honda Civic. The valet looked at the dented bumper, then at me, then back at the bumper. I handed him the keys with a $5 tip. It was the only cash I carried. My black card was tucked deep inside the lining of my purse, invisible. Chanel was waiting by the entrance. She looked like a disco ball in a rented sequin gown. You brought that car? She hissed, grabbing my elbow. I told you to park down the street and walk. It's raining, I said simply. You look. She scanned my outfit, a plain gray dress from Target, no jewelry, sensible flats. Perfect. You look exactly like what you are, invisible. She dragged me into the ballroom. It was a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. The air smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. Go get me a glass of Chardonnay, Chanel ordered, pointing toward the bar. And don't talk to anyone. If someone speaks to you, just smile and walk away. Retrieving the alcohol was a simple task. Returning to her side, I assumed my position slightly behind her left shoulder, the perfect angle for a shadow. Marcellus joined us. He was handsome in a slimy, polished way. His tuxedo was too tight and his teeth were too white. Chanel tells me you're looking for work, Marcellus said, not bothering to look me in the eye. I might need a receptionist at my clinic. Can you answer phones? It's not complicated. I can answer phones, I said. Great. I'll pay you minimum wage. It's better than nothing, right? He laughed. Chanel laughed with him, a high-pitched, nervous sound. They turned their backs to me and began to work the room. A group of older doctors drifted nearby, discussing the medical event of the week. The emergency craniotomy performed on Senator Williams. It was a masterclass, a cardiologist was saying. The tumor was wrapped around the speech center. One slip, and the senator would have been mute for life. Actually, Marcellus interrupted, swirling his scotch. I heard it wasn't that difficult. My father said the surgeon just got lucky. They went in through the nose, transsphenoidal approach. Standard stuff. I stared at the floor to hide my smirk. The senator's surgery was not transsphenoidal. It was a pterional craniotomy. And it wasn't standard. It was a high-risk procedure that required 6 hours of microscopic dissection. I knew this because I was the one who held the scalpel. Really? The cardiologist looked skeptical. No, Marcellus insisted, his voice loud with arrogance. Trust me, I know how these things work. The surgeon was probably some hotshot trying to make a name for themselves, overhyped. Chanel nodded enthusiastically. Marcellus knows everything about the field. He's practically a neurosurgeon himself. The cardiologist exchanged a look with his colleague. It was a look of polite disbelief. I could have corrected him. I could have detailed the exact angle of the incision, the texture of the tumor, the terrifying moment the senator's blood pressure dropped. I could have ended his little performance right there. But I didn't. I watched Marcellus dig a hole with his ignorance. I watched Chanel decorate that hole with her pride. Silence, I reminded myself. Let them dig. So, Zyla, Marcellus said, cornering me near the shrimp cocktail tower. He didn't wait for an answer. It's probably for the best. Relationships require value. And right now, let's be honest, you're a liability. No man wants to date a project. Then, having satisfied his need to belittle me, he pivoted to his favorite subject, himself. He turned to a group of young residents who were hanging on his every word. Big things are coming, he announced, puffing out his chest. I'm pivoting. Plastic surgery is fine. It pays the bills, but I want legacy. I submitted my application for the neurosurgery fellowship at Johns Hopkins this week. The group gasped. Hopkins? One resident whispered. That's the holy grail. The acceptance rate is less than 1%. For normal people, Marcellus winked. It's a done deal. My father knows the board. He made a call this morning. I heard the new program director is tough, another resident ventured. They say she rejects 90% of applicants in the first round. Marcellus laughed, a loud, barking sound. Oh, her? Yeah, I heard about her. Some bitter, middle-aged workaholic who has nothing in her life but the hospital. My dad says she's just a frustrated spinster. She just needs a man to tell her what to do. Once my dad explains who I am, she'll fall in line. I took a calculated sip of water. The bitter, middle-aged workaholic he was referring to was me. I am 32. I am not frustrated, and I had reviewed Marcellus's application that morning. His surgical sample video was a disaster, his suturing was sloppy, his hands shook under magnification, and his arrogance made him unteachable. Chanel chimed in, wrapping her arm around his waist. Well, thank God you have connections, babe. Unlike Zyla here. She couldn't even get an interview at a walk-in clinic. She raised her voice so the nearby table of donors could hear. Zyla, stop eating all the shrimp. Those are for the guests. Why don't you go find a broom? The waiter dropped a napkin over there. Make yourself useful. She laughed. The crowd laughed politely. My parents, standing a few feet away, looked down at their shoes, ashamed of me. I looked at them. Really looked at them. There is a concept in strategy called the hubris of the winner. In every war, the most fatal weakness isn't a lack of money or weapons. It is arrogance. Marcellus and Chanel were standing there, insulting me to my face, revealing their secrets, exposing their leverage, all because they despised me. They believed I was a stupid, helpless housewife. History has proven. The person who is most confident is the easiest one to kill. They were dancing on a minefield, convinced they were on a dance floor. And they had just handed me the detonator. You're right, I said softly, looking at Marcellus. I don't have connections. Exactly, Chanel sneered, patting my cheek. So try not to breathe too loud. You're using up the air for the important people. Dr. Otis Sterling ignored the shattered wineglass at his feet. He ignored Chanel, who was standing there with her mouth open like a fish gasping for air. He only had eyes for me. Professor Vance, he repeated, his voice booming in the suddenly quiet lobby. I have been trying to reach your office all week. The board is still talking about the Williams procedure. He turned to the gathering crowd, his hand still gripping mine firmly. Ladies and gentlemen, Otis announced, commanding the room with the ease of a man who owned the building. If you haven't had the pleasure, allow me to introduce the finest pair of hands on the East Coast. This is Dr. Zyla Vance, the surgeon who saved Senator Williams last Tuesday. He paused, his eyes sliding over to Marcellus, who had turned the color of old paper. It was a terrenal craniotomy performed with a level of precision I haven't seen in 30 years. The silence that followed was heavy, physical. It pressed against my eardrums. Chanel found her voice first. It was a strangled, high-pitched squeak. Dr. Sterling. There must be a mistake. Zyla she's unemployed. She's my assistant. Otis frowned. looking at Chanel for the first time. He looked at her the way one looks at a stain on a silk tie. "Assistant?" He laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Young lady, Dr. Vance is the chair of neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins. She makes my salary look like pocket change." He turned back to me. "Speaking of which, Zyla, I saw the transfer come through just before I arrived. I didn't think you wanted the recognition, given how private you are, but the hospital board insisted." He gestured to the massive LED screen behind the stage, which had been cycling through the names of bronze and silver donors. The screen flickered. The music swelled, and then, in giant, gold letters, my name filled the wall. Diamond donor. Dr. Zyla Vance contribution. $500,000. A collective gasp ripped through the room. My mother grabbed my father's arm to steady herself. Chanel stared at the screen. Then at me. Her eyes bulging. 500,000? She whispered. Her voice trembled. That's a mistake. You don't have money. You drive a Civic." "I drive a Civic because I don't need a car to tell me who I am," I said. My voice was calm, carrying easily in the silence. "And I donated that money to the pediatric wing. The one you said was a waste of resources earlier tonight." I looked at Marcellus. He was sweating now, visibly shaking. He knew. He had just realized that the bitter spinster he had insulted, the unemployed liability he had mocked, was the only person standing between him and his career. Otis clapped a hand on my shoulder. "We are honored to have you, Zyla, truly." I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a surgeon who had just located the tumor and was picking up the scalpel. "Thank you, Dr. Sterling," I said. "But we have one more piece of business to discuss." Chanel was vibrating. It was a low, pathetic frequency of denial. "This is a prank," she laughed, looking around wildly, her voice shrill and desperate. "Otis, she paid you to say this, didn't she? Zyla doesn't have $500,000. She borrowed rent money from me last month." Dr. Sterling's face hardened into granite. "Are you accusing me of fraud, young lady? Are you accusing this hospital of fabricating financial records?" "No, she's lying. She's always lying." "Be quiet," Otis commanded. The authority in his voice snapped her mouth shut like a trap. I stepped forward. I didn't look at Chanel. She was irrelevant now, a fly trapped in a web she had spun herself. I looked at Marcellus. He was backing away, trying to fade into the wallpaper. His tan had vanished, leaving him gray and sweaty. "Dr. Sterling," I said, addressing the son, not the father. "We need to talk about your fellowship application to Johns Hopkins." Marcellus froze. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. I can withdraw it," he stammered, his hands shaking. "I can reapply next year." "I didn't know. I'll fix it." "You can't withdraw it," I said calmly, "because I already processed it." I took a sip of water. The silence in the room was delicious. It was heavy with the weight of consequences. "I watched your surgical tape this morning, Marcellus. Your technique on the duroplasty was amateur at best. Your sutures were uneven. You have a bad habit of rushing the closing to get to the golf course." I paused, letting the critique sink in. The other doctors in the room were nodding. They knew bad work when they heard about it. But what really disqualified you wasn't your hands. It was your character. At Hopkins, we don't hire people who belittle others to make themselves feel big. We don't hire liabilities. "Please," he whispered. "Zyla, Professor Vance. I signed your rejection letter at 7:45 in the morning. It's in your inbox now." For a second, nobody moved. The verdict hung in the air, final and irreversible. Then Marcellus turned on Chanel. The rage in his eyes was ugly. It was the rage of a narcissist who needed someone to blame. "You," he spat. "Babe, wait." Chanel reached for him. Tears streaking her heavy makeup, he slapped her hand away violently. "Don't touch me. You told me she was a loser. You told me she was a nobody." "She tricked us," Chanel shrieked. "She didn't tell us." "You tricked me," Marcellus yelled, his voice cracking so loud it echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "You made me insult the chair of the admissions board to her face. You destroyed my career to make yourself look important." He looked at his father, desperate for a lifeline. Dad, I didn't know. You have to help me. Talk to her. Otis Sterling didn't even blink. He looked at his son with profound disappointment. I think you should leave, son. Before you embarrass yourself further. Marcellus looked at me one last time, a look of pure terror, and then stormed out of the ballroom, shoving a waiter aside as he ran. Chanel stood there alone. The spotlight she had craved all night was finally on her, but it was harsh and unforgiving. Her fiancé was gone. Her rich family was gone. Her lie was dead on the floor next to the shattered wine glass. She looked at me, eyes wide with panic. Zyla, please. Fix this. Call him back. Fix it? I asked. I'm your sister, she sobbed. You can't let him leave me. I didn't make him leave you, Chanel, I said. You did. I just turned on the lights. I didn't wait for Chanel to answer. There was nothing she could say that I wanted to hear. Her sobbing echoed in the high ceilings of the ballroom, a mournful soundtrack to the end of her charade. I turned on my heel and walked away. Zyla, wait. It was my mother. She and my father had finally found their ability to move. They hurried after me, their faces a mixture of shock and terror. You can't just leave, my mother stammered, grabbing my arm. Your sister is. She's ruined. You have to help her. You have money now. You can fix this. I looked at her hand on my arm. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the familiar pang of guilt. I didn't feel the urge to fix it, to pay the bill, to smooth things over. I didn't ruin her, Mom, I said, gently removing her hand. The truth did. But we're family, my father pleaded, his voice weak. We didn't know. You didn't ask, I corrected. For 13 years, you didn't ask. I walked out the double doors and into the cool night air. The rain had stopped. The city lights of D.C. reflected on the wet pavement, shimmering like scattered diamonds. The head valet saw me coming. He nodded respectfully and signaled his team. A moment later, a sleek, vintage Porsche 911 Targa pulled up to the curb. My driver stepped out and held the door open. I saw my parents watching from the hotel entrance. Their mouths were open. They looked at the car, then at me, realizing that the 10-year-old Civic was just a costume I wore to make them comfortable. As I slid into the leather seat, a thought settled in my mind with crystal clarity. In families like mine, we are taught that love is sacrifice. We are taught that talking about money is vulgar. But the brutal reality is that financial independence is the only true iron shield against indignity. Why was I able to flip the table tonight? Not just because I was smart. Not just because I was talented. But because I had the receipts. My secret bank account, my title deed, my reputation, these weren't just assets. They were my oxygen tank. They were the reason I didn't have to beg for Marcellus's approval or Chanel's permission to exist. I had built a fortress that their toxicity couldn't breach. Where to, Dr. Vance? My driver asked. I looked back one last time. Chanel was standing in the doorway now. Mascara running down her face, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Home, I said. The real one. The engine roared to life, a deep, powerful growl. We pulled away from the curb, leaving the Ritz-Carlton, the shattered wine glass, and my former life in the rearview mirror. I checked my vitals, steady heart rate, clear airways. I felt free. If you were Zyla, would you forgive this sister, or would you cut her off forever? Please leave your opinion in the comments below.